Hello and welcome to Manor Estate Wines. My name's Peter and welcome to another episode of Wine Secrets. Today we're going to brush up on our history. We're going to look at where wine started and how the winemaking process developed over the years to its present form. Do you know, when we talk about history, it's all perception. So, I can imagine that as soon as fruit was created, a plum would drop to the ground and the plum would go through the natural fermentation process to actually produce an alcohol form wine inside the plum, which animals could eat and they would feel the effects of the alcohol. Probably been around forever. But you know, the first recorded eras in history is something between 6,000 and 8,000 BC, when grapes were first fermented and put in vessels to be drunk. Now, all that occurred in the Middle East, somewhere around that period. But the Egyptians, days of Tutankhamun, the Egyptians were the first people around 4,000 BC to actually start labeling wine. The year it's produced, who made the wine, and what the wine was. And this was a very big improvement in where we're heading to today. But you know, one of the biggest things that occurred is in the era of the Romans, 200 AD, when they invented the wine barrel. Then things really began to change. Oh, that's heavy. Look, now that wine can be transported, it was a revolution, a wine revolution. From then on, cultures like the Phoenicians, who were great traders in that era, grabbed the wine in the barrels and started to distribute wine all through the Mediterranean, Europe and afar. And that's when it began to spread worldwide. And in fact, by 1000 AD, France had started to produce wine and all the varieties we now know. As the wine culture spread through Europe, it wasn't until the 1600s that glass bottles were used with corks. They weren't quite the right bottle though, a different form of bottle. In the 1830s was the first time that this shaped bottle actually began being produced. And they produced these from then right to now. It's the most popular way of transporting wine, around this size glass. Now, it's interesting to note also that during all this time, no one really knew how the fruit juice became wine. It wasn't until 1860 when Louis Pasteur actually found out that the agent that turns the fruit juice into wine was yeast. And then there was a big revolution. What the winemaking process evolved greatly. And that's what we're going to talk about next. You know, things have changed so much since that time, and in particular, prior to the 1800s, the era known as the Industrial Revolution, everything was done by hand. For instance, just to put a cork on a bottle was a chore. Someone had to get the machine out, they get the bottle, put the cork in there, plunge the cork in, and there we have one bottle done. A lot of repetition. Even sterilising the bottle, drying it was a chore. Here we go, here's a drying rack. Bottles go in here and they had to wait till everything is perfect, ready for bottling. But you know, that wasn't fast enough for the demand. So that produced another era of winemaking. So in the 1800s, it was all about the mass production of wine, multiplying the effect of one person. Now the 1900s was all about the science of wine, and in particular the way science evolved the process of winemaking to its present day. Now, if we were to simplify the art of science in winemaking, we can put it down to three things. It's about the processing, the fermentation, and the storage of the wine. And that's what we're going to go in more detail next. Processing in the 19th century had the added advantage of technology. So what we use is we use the science behind wine to collect data about the juice that will become the wine, and in fact the whole process going through the making of the wine. Now, in addition to that, other areas became vitally important to produce a variety of wine, such as whether we destemmed the fruit before we actually produce the wine, whether we keep the berry on or off, whether we crush or not. So all these attributes became very important in the winemaking process, making it a complex procedure, and as a result, processing advanced quite a lot in the 19th century. Now, as we know, there's two fermentation processes. There's the primary fermentation and the secondary fermentation. Now, during the 19th century, technology's changed quite considerably since the early days. Now, the introduction of stainless steel, gauges, devices that will automatically make the process easier has improved, and that has changed the outlook of the wine. A simple thing like heat. Heat can change a wine, and it's very simply controlled now by thermostats, which weren't available previously. So there's a lot of technologies that you can use. Now, the biggest thing is, and we talked about Louis Pasteur before, malolactic fermentation was never understood in the past, but now we understand it to a minute detail, so we can manipulate all of the factors to produce the wine that we want, all through fermentation. Now, finally, about storage. You know, these days the devices available to us to be able to monitor wine while it's stored is immense. We can even have data now sent to our mobile phone. So the technology's changed quite a bit, and that's helped us keep track of things like pH, like the evaporation of wine in various containers that are stored. There's a lot of technology now to help us monitor and to keep the wine as fresh as possible to the day it's drunk. So look, technology over the years has really made a difference in the 19th century, and the digital world has made a big difference to wine production. Do you know, just by having a simple glass of wine these days, it's hard to realize and appreciate the history that winemaking process has gone through. You know, it all could have started with a fruit dropping to the ground and fermenting into something that tastes like wine, then developed through the ages, through the technologies of the Egyptians, the Romans, the Phoenicians, the French, Europeans, and now to the 19th century, where we've got a technology that produces a range of more complicated wine that was ever envisaged in the early days. So there you go. We've had a great journey through time, looking at the milestones that make wine what it is today. And we look forward to seeing you next time right here at Manor Estate for our next episode of Wine Secrets. But before I go, I'm going old school and have my own journey back in time.